Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Air Force Systems Command, I want to welcome you to this initial ceremony and sign over to Tactical Air Command from Systems Command of this radar-borne balloon, which we sometimes call Seek Skyhook. You'll often hear it by that name. We're here to celebrate two events. One is the start of the operational control and the operation of the balloon by Tactical Air Command, and the other is the sign of transfer from Systems Command to Tactical Air Command. Systems Command, as most of you know, is charged with the job of acquiring, designing, and producing these systems. Tactical Air Command is charged with the responsibility of operating the systems. This one's particularly unique because often if you follow our weapon systems, it takes 3, 5, or even longer years to get them in the field. This system we needed in a hurry, and we put these contracts out last December, and you see the system behind me now in less than roughly 8 months. That's some sort of a record for us, and we hope to do it a lot more in the future. That really wouldn't have been possible without a lot of work from the people at Hanscom, Electronic Systems Division, the Tactical Air Command Program Office down here, the Pan American group at the range, the Eastern Test Range, RCA, who did the design and pulled the system together that you just saw launched. Now there's some other people that had a big part to play in this, and that's the folks in Washington that you see on this stage, who really cleared the way of a lot of barriers that can slow down programs so that we could really move forward at full press and get it in the field in 8 months. Now I want to proceed with the official turnover. I'll represent Air Force Systems Command. General Violet will represent Tactical Air Command, and we'll sign the certificate for turnover at this time. It's now an operational system in Tactical Air Command and no longer belongs to us. We're very honored today to have some distinguished visitors and speakers. And I first want to introduce Admiral Daniel Murphy, who's Chief of Staff to the Vice President, George.
Well, that didn't take too much, did it? Just a stroke of the pen, and we now have a operational system that we all have been watching born and for many, many months. And I agree with you, General, that we must congratulate all those involved. And I'll make a couple of comments a little bit later on about that. Dr. Coram, Mr. Rittenhouse here, did I meet him yet? Yes. And distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, first I'd like to tell you that the only reason we don't have our distinguished members of Congress here with us, they certainly plan to be here, is because of an important vote on a conference report having to do with a continuing resolution. And since most of our pay depends on that, I think it's just as well that they stay back and work on that. I think you all are aware of the interest of the Vice President and President Reagan in doing something about stopping the flow of illicit drugs into the United States. The system that you saw launched just now was purchased and will be operated mainly in the air defense of our country against the air-breathing threat that we have facing the United States. The interest of myself, although I certainly have been interested in air defense all my life, at this point in my career is mainly concerned with the ability of this radar to help us fight the drug war. Never in the history of our country has an administration devoted as much top-level attention to this drug war as we have with President Reagan. In March of this year, the President asked the Vice President to expand his interdiction efforts to the whole nation. The President wanted the Vice President to try and profit from the lessons learned in South Florida and apply them to the 12,000 miles of border and coastline that we have in the United States. No easy job. The new effort was kicked off in May of this year. Now we call that the National Narcotics Border Interdiction System, NBIS. Isn't that a name? Let me tell you how we got that. First of all, Ed Meese said, we've got enough task forces in this country. If you have another one, nobody will know what we're doing. So he came up with the word system. The President came up with the word national. Many other organizations within the government were concerned that we might be too ambitious and insisted that it be limited to the border and that it just be interdiction. In other words, not investigation and litigation. And of course, you had to have the word narcotics in there. And in Washington, that's how you get crazy names like National Narcotics Border Interdiction System. He found out that we didn't have enough judges to try them if you did arrest them. When you talked to the judges, they said, well, you can't have more judges, you don't have enough courtrooms in South Florida. In a period of a few weeks, the Vice President put on an all-court press with the help of all those who have been involved in this business for many, many years. I'm talking about Customs, DEA, FBI, IRS, Coast Guard. Everybody came to his assistance in coming up with a program that would help. What did he do? Well, first of all, he went to Chief Justice Berger and he got 4 new federal judges, and before they could complain about not having enough courtrooms, he got GSA to make sure that there were at least 4 to 5 more courtrooms. FBI, DEA, Customs, ATF, U.S. Marshals, IRS, and others. He was able to increase the offshore surveillance capability. The Coast Guard doubled their effectiveness. The Vice President provided increased coordination among all the agencies involved, and I think that from his position in government, it was very, very helpful to everybody involved to see that that coordination and cooperation worked smoothly. He also was able to increase the use of our national intelligence. You remember he headed up CIA at one time. So he didn't have too much difficulty along that line. And this has made a major contribution. The attitude of the citizens has improved. A poll was taken back in February of '81, and people were asked, are you considering leaving this area of the country because of crime? 39% of the people said yes, they were. The same poll was taken in February of this year, '83, and that number has dropped to 9%, and it may well be lower today than it was back in February. About 25,000 pounds of cocaine, and that adds up to something like a $10 billion street value in the drugs I just mentioned. There is no doubt that the amount of drugs being seized in the United States today exceeds anything like that in the past history of our war against drugs. It's any one of them or all of them. One, we may see a drop in the use of cocaine in the United States. There are figures in the White House, Dr. Carlton Turner, who keeps track of that, that indicate that there is a slight downward trend in the usage of drugs in the United States. Or secondly, there may be just such a glut of cocaine on the international market that what we seize is easily replaced. Or third, that our efforts are not that successful and that they're penetrating us with ease. As I say, it could be any one of the 3 above. I lean a little bit towards the second one, mainly because we know there's a glut on the market. Department of Defense, the Air Force, RCA, ILC, for moving this project along so expeditiously and so smoothly once the people in Washington had finally removed the hurdles that you faced earlier on. I would like also to thank Congress, because we've gotten a great deal of support from Congress. I expect this new radar to match the sterling performance that we're getting today from the Cudjoe Key radar, that is the sister radar to this one.
We're also honored today to have the Assistant Secretary to the Secretary of the Air Force for Manpower, Reserve Affairs, and Installation, Mr. Tyler McCoy. Todd?
The Air Force is only one part of a larger effort. We're glad to be a part of that. We offer people. We have AWACS aircraft that fly and take part in surveilling other areas, as well as they will continue to participate in the war on drugs in Florida. We are pleased to find out so much about what the capabilities of our other sister services are, because as we find out more about that, we can take a greater advantage of those to include at a point in time where we actually may be in armed conflict. And so it's all to the good in terms of operational coherence with respect to military capabilities.
Thank you very much, Secretary McCoy. I'm very happy to be here representing my boss, Secretary of Defense Weinberger. I'd like, first of all, to congratulate the Air Force, and in particular the Systems Command and the Tactical Air Command, for getting this system online in record time. And on behalf of the Secretary, I have to say we'll look for the same thing with the B-1. All told, about $8 billion worth of defense-related goods and services come from the state of Florida. This dedication of the 2nd Air Force balloon with its radar, I think, is another example of the determination of the citizens of Florida and the citizens of the United States to put an end to illicit drug trafficking in this state and in the nation. Also, an excellent example of the cooperation between the executive and legislative branches and both parties of our system against this war against the drugs. One of the people who wanted to be here today, who could not, who had an awful lot to do with urging the Department of Defense to install this second radar balloon, is Congressman Glenn English from Oklahoma, who works on the House Government Operations Committee. This is a happy day for all of us, a day which helps national security, helps in this war against drugs, helps us improve military readiness, protect national security, as well as our way of life. And I thank you all for allowing me, on behalf of my boss, Secretary Weinberger, to be part of this. Thank you very much.
Well, it was real. It turned out not to be close air support. It turned out to be trench warfare in the commercial marketplace, mostly with the Japanese, but also with the French and the Germans and probably 10 or 12 other countries. Now, what was at stake? What was at stake was our marketplace in the United States of America from the day. And we normally estimate a job like this at about 1.5 years for performance. Well, what did we do? We applied management innovation as a team. Specifically, we used specialized job shops for rapid fabrication of some of our more critical parts. And we transferred experienced specialists from already important jobs to these jobs in order to meet our goal. Less than peak performance out of everyone. And there were a lot of government members on that team. And here I'm going to douse you with acronyms. At the Air Staff, AFSC, ESD, TAC, ADTAC,